carbon dioxide comes from volcanoes. So how much are we talking about? Which is the greatest? Well, if you look at the whole world, you've got transportation is about 14% of the carbon dioxide, industrial processes 17%, power stations 21%, land use and biomass burning, setting fire to forests, residential, fossil fuel retrieving and agricultural byproducts, the thing that comes out the back end of cows. And that's roughly for the world, but if you look at some place like New Zealand, the methane, which comes out the back of cows and sheep, makes up 50% of the global warming. So New Zealand's trying to do something about that, I'm not quite sure what. It's a bit difficult. 70 million tonnes per day of carbon dioxide comes from burning fossil fuels. 70 million tonnes per day. 10 million tonnes per day comes from agriculture, 3 million tonnes per day comes from volcanoes. So the biggest thing here is fossil fuels. Who's the worst? Well, surprise, surprise, USA is right at the top here. And then comes Russia, then comes China. Recently, Russia and China have changed position. China is using a huge amount of fossil fuels. Where's Australia? Well, it's right down there. So we're fine. Well, aren't we good? We can sit here, put out our chests and say, well, it's their fault. Trouble is, if you look at per person, North America 19.3, Australia 17.1. We are really a big carbon user. Really big. That's why Australia sort of looked at and said, why are you using so much carbon? Well, the answer is we have coal-fired electricity where we're using a lot of nasty, dirty coal and we're burning that to try, and there's a lot of ash in it and all this sort of other stuff. The other reason is we have big mining operations where we ship dirt an awful long way. We have large cars and large houses that leak. We do. We are one of the biggest producers of aluminium in the world. Aluminium is almost liquid electricity. It takes a huge amount of electricity to form aluminium. Well, Australia's got bauxite, so we produce aluminium and sell it all over the world. And people like aluminium because it makes the cars lighter and they're more fuel efficient. But we wear the carbon problem. The rest of the world gets the benefit, but we wear the carbon problem. That's why we have so much carbon dioxide. Some odd results. So we've got this global warming going on. What does it mean? The air over Antarctic has warmed dramatically over the past 30 years. Horrors. Terrible. Nearly 0.75 degrees per decade in the winter has occurred about 3 miles, 5 kilometres above the surface. The trouble is, the rise can't be explained by climate models and some mechanisms of climate change we don't understand, says John Turner, because it's 5 kilometres above the Antarctic. It's getting warmer. 5 kilometres up in the air. And the Antarctic is not getting anything. Why is that? Don't know. Surface temperatures have increased 2.5 degrees in the last 50 years in the Antarctic Peninsula, but nothing anywhere else. And if you look at the amount of ice and snow in there, it's that. And what you notice is there's the minimum, and from 1978 through to 2007, it has remained virtually constant, and the maximums remain virtually constant. So in the Antarctic, it's not having any effect whatsoever, basically. There's a big argument about whether you do surface area or you do thickness of ice. But basically, Antarctic has remained the same. But if we go to the other side of the Earth, the Arctic, sea ice in the Arctic shrank dramatically this summer and is now smaller than it has been in a century of record keeping. Summers in the Arctic could become completely ice-free. We're going to see a dramatic different Arctic, see Mark Seray's Ice Data Centre in Boulder, Colorado. Since 2002, satellite imagery has revealed strong melting north of Siberia and Alaska in the early springtime. According to the new research, however, the melting trend has now spread throughout the Arctic. What does this mean? Let's look at it. In September 2005, that was the amount of ice over the Arctic. September 2007, that was the amount of ice. And what did they expect at the same time? That little line out there. So it has decreased a lot in the Arctic, and it's had no effect in the Antarctic. And if you plot the ice extent in millions of square kilometres up here, just there, And you look at it from 1978 through to 2007, what do you see? It's been decreasing quite linearly, except for 2007 when it dropped like a scone. So the amount of ice has been melting a lot, ice has been melting a lot. They're all above the sea level, so when they melt, the water comes down. China's noticed about 100 millimetres increase in the sea. Now there's a big argument about if all the ice melted, what would it mean? Some people say 600 millimetres, other people say it's around 10 metres. There's a bit of a difference, 600 millimetres compared to 10 metres. But that's what they say. So it's simple. All we have to do, the world's temperature is increasing, it's causing weather problems and the ice caps to melt. It's caused by carbon dioxide. This comes from us burning fossil fuels. If we stop burning fossil fuels, the world will return to normal in a few weeks. There you go. Trouble is, we use it for agriculture, we use it for all sorts of things. If I said to you, you're not allowed to travel anymore, you have to walk everywhere and grow your own food in your backyard, you'd say, in your boot. And it's not that simple anyway. To get the earth really nice and yummy, there's more to it. We have a thing called the sun. And the sun is pumping out energy and it doesn't do it at the same rate all the time. It is a nuclear reactor which gets bigger and smaller and bigger and smaller. Heat from the sun has been increasing. The sun's brightness hasn't changed much over the last 20 years, but it's been brighter in the last 60 years than in the previous 1,150 years. The sun is brighter and stronger. Over the past few hundred years, there's been a steady increase in the number of sunspots, a trend that has accelerated in the past century, just as the time when the Earth's been getting warmer. So if you plot the output of the sun, which is that line running through here, and you plot it against the temperature profile, guess what? They line up. Now, it doesn't take much to say, if you have a 1-bar heater, you probably don't have these up in Townsville, but we tend to know them down. Brisbane has them a bit, I noticed. If you've got a little heater and you've only got 1 bar on, it feels warm, and if you put 2 bars on, it gets hot. The more heat you put into a room, the hotter it gets. Well, it's the same thing, and somehow they managed to plot it over 500 million years, the sun's output versus the Earth's temperature, and guess what? The two of them all line up. So it could be that the Earth is getting hotter because the sun's putting out more heat. If you think this is getting a bit complex, is it carbon dioxide, is it the sun's output, is it whatever? Yes, it is getting complex. Sorry about that. Be careful about statistics. This pie chart shows how much pie I ate while making this chart. Statistics are wonderful. I can prove anything you like. The average person moves house every 6 years. Well, Anne and I lived in the same house for 30 years. So sorry, the statistic is wrong. No, it's not. It was the average. So what does it all mean? The danger of linking things. If you plot the coffee usage in Australia since 1940 to 2000, guess what? It's going up. And if you plot the global warming, it lines up exactly. So, if you have more of these, it's going to get hotter. All right, hands up. Who had a coffee in between before here? Yeah. It's your fault. It's a little bit of a joke, but it says it's a rotten, complex system. There's a lot more to it than just meets the eye. So be careful. Just because a graph looks good doesn't mean it's right. The Earth and its climate are very, 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 very complex. For example, in September the 11th, when there was the Twin Towers blew up, we flew into America. We were one of the first planes in, Anne and I. In September the 11th, Chicago temperature, because there was no planes over Chicago for a week, Chicago's temperature went up 2 degrees average because there were no planes. Why? The planes flying over the top of Chicago are up high, they're burning fuel, which produces water vapour out the back. The water vapour became ice, little bits of ice. The ice reflected the sunlight back. So because of that, Chicago got 2 degrees cooler because of all the planes. Take the planes away, Chicago gets warmer. That says this is an incredibly complex system. We've got things happening all over the place, and we're trying to say it's carbon dioxide. No, it's not, it's coffee. We can't judge the weather for tomorrow. So how are we going to predict